Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. I am very excited about both segments from for this program this evening. As you know, we talk to writers and journalists, reporters and editors, and I'm thrilled with the new reporter, relatively new reporter, you're going to see in our first segment. In our second segment, we're going to talk to one of the great innovators in nutrition and food and teaching kids how to be healthy. He is also host of a new BronxNet TV show. So we're going to do that in our second segment. But in our first segment, we are going to introduce to you Elba Rodriguez. You see her as E.T. Rodriguez in the Bronx Times. Elba, nice to have you with us.
Nice being here.
A little background. We would love to introduce young writers to the people of the Bronx. You were telling me before the show that you grew up in the Bronx, and so let's talk a little bit about how you got from your neighborhood to becoming a writer and reporter at the Bronx Times, and a
Yeah,
freelance reporter as well.
correct. Yes. It was a very, it's a very long journey, but I
We
started
only have
working.
a short segment here.
Yeah, I started working at the Museum of Modern Art, and I was a journalist, an arts journalist there. And then I said, okay, I need to get my master's. I need to progress in this. So I'm at the Craig Newmark School of Journalism now. And I found out a friend was freelancing for the Bronx Times, and I pitched myself to my editor, Christian Falcone, in a very heartfelt email. And he took me on, and I showed him one of my works, a draft, and it's been
And
smooth
here we
sailing
are.
from there.
What is it? You know, it's interesting because in a previous program we talked last week's show. We talked to one of your fellow classmates at the Craig Newmark School who writes for the Mott Haven Herald, but he's from somewhere else, and we got his impressions of covering the Bronx. What is it like to being from the Bronx and then saying, "Well, now I've got to kind of maybe take a step back or take a different view"? What's it like to for a Bronxite to cover the Bronx?
Yeah, it's very passionate to me, right? It's
Oh,
a very how would I say? It's very close to my heart. So a lot of the Bronx gets a bad rap. They're always in the
oh,
news
don't
for,
start.
yeah, they're in the news for not so great things often. And I felt like we need to really elevate the Bronx and show the arts and culture and food specifically that's in the borough. You don't have a lot of people covering food in the Bronx at all, actually. And so my mission is to have people come into the borough and experience the better side of the Bronx.
And the better side and the cultural side, and among them, the cultural side is, of course, the diversity and the many different kinds of foods. Let's just start. Actually, we were talking about two of the articles that you've written. Let's start with the food, since that is your passion. You did a piece on the top 10 rooftop patios, which nowadays is getting more attention maybe than in the past because of COVID and all the restaurants, have outdoor seating. You want to give us top one, two, and three or something, or tell us what the criteria you use to determine which are the best?
Yes. So the list isn't really numbered. There's
Oh,
no
sorry.
the one, two, three. Yeah,
It's
no,
so
that's
competitive. I know.
yeah, I don't want to like put anyone out there, but yeah, my criteria for it was number one, ambiance. How does it look? How does it feel? Is there a young crowd? Are they going to enjoy themselves if they go there? Is it Instagrammable? So that was definitely
Wow,
one.
what does that mean? I know I'm
Instagrammable.
older than you, so I may need a little bit of an education. Instagrammable meaning taking photos, and then they're also involved in that social media.
Right, just taking pictures or taking videos for reels so that you can post it, get likes on your page. So a lot of the places that are on there are pretty Instagrammable places
Two
that,
two that I've been to. The one on top of the old post office building on the Grand Concourse at 149th Street, and then the other one, which we were actually talking about before, is the Kingsbridge Social Club. Not actually a rooftop, but they've got kind of a canopy and a unique thing going on. Is there any one? Is there any one or something you want to pick out to tell us about that was particularly interesting or worthwhile to tell people about?
sure. Well, I would say Zona de Cuba is the one on the top of the rooftop on 149th
Yep.
Street. It's just really jaw dropping when you get in there.
I
You
know.
know, as soon as you're there, there's a huge refrigerator filled with like top shelf champagnes, bottles on the wall, congas. As a matter of fact, the GM told me that they have 200 palm trees up on their
Wow.
rooftop. So, you know, it just really is extraordinary to see, you know, very eye.
And also the history of that building makes it even more special because it, of course, was an iconic and still is an iconic building in the Bronx, and of course, it went through a number of issues before we actually got something up there. So that's pretty exciting. We hope to read more about you working with food, et cetera, et cetera. So the story that really inspired your invitation, as you well know, is a story that you wrote about street vendors, um, saying that the American dream has become an American impossibility for street vendors. I think that street vending right now is becoming more and more popular. That we have more carts out there. We have a number of ethnic carts out there, a lot of halal carts, and wagons and all those kinds of things. There's a seafood wagon that goes about and a lobster wagon, and there's all kinds of different things. But why are you saying there's difficulty here?
Well, a lot of these street vendors are, whether they're licensed or not, are getting hit with tickets constantly.
Oh,
So, one of the issues, for example, is there's a certain amount of space that you can be between the curb and your food cart. So, one street vendor has scaffolding that kind of creates a space where she's not allowed to be within that space. And every time the people see her, or I guess the DOH, the Department of Health, or whoever it may be, sees her, she gets ticketed. She gets ticketed every time.
well, so now is she's not doing something legal, or she's just trying to survive, or it's kind of a nuance. I mean, I would appreciate the injustice, but is she breaking a guideline there?
Well, yes. So although she is completely licensed to sell, you know, there are just such stringent rules that these
Mhm.
mobile food vendors have to follow.
And I'm sure I'm going to make the assumption that in order to get, like, to be supported and get somebody to argue for you, they're not on the priority list for, let's say, elected officials or community boards, because in some cases, maybe many cases, they see them as nuisances in the community. Right?
Well,
And
there's
do I have that right?
Well, I wouldn't know if they're considered a nuisance to the
Okay.
neighborhoods, but there is the Street Vendor Project, which helps to provide legal aid to a lot of the street vendors that are facing
Uh-huh.
arrests or exorbitant ticketing.
So, here's the thing, and the whole notion of, the American dream and whatever. I find, especially in the Bronx, where we're so individual and so creative, and so many people have been disenfranchised by jobs and everything else, especially after COVID, people are cooking in their homes and they're making stuff. And because of, again, the greatness of our creativity and of our diversity, they're making stuff that they want to share, whether it be a cultural thing, or they're just really good at it. And so we don't have the avenue to get them to be able to do it and really develop it, not unless they have an investor who's going to spend thousands, tens of thousands, to buy them a location. Right, this is the problem.
Yeah, well, according to the DOH, you can't have food that you cooked at home.
I understand that. I meant in terms of them developing and getting to a point where they want to be vending in the street. That's
Yeah,
how a lot of them get started.
Well, permitting has been a really big problem, right? There was a
Mm.
cap on permits for a very long time, and the wait list is in the tens of thousands.
Wow.
But there's only about 4,000 permits out. Now that's going to be expanded this year. Actually, this month, they're supposed to be handing out a certain amount every month for the next 10 years, but people will continue applying for these permits. So it doesn't really quench the amount of people that will be continuing to
As
apply.
as many as they can serve or certify, they're going to get more on the back end.
Right.
Let me ask you this, and this goes back to your headline and your concept about the American dream. Is it possible to create a system where food cart vendors, I mean, unless they have, the most popular one that gets in the news and everything. Is it possible to create a an industry that can get people to be ultimately successful and raise a family, etc.? I
I
mean, is
think
that possible?
so.
You do.
Absolutely. So one of the people that I interviewed in the article, David, he's very happy. He says that he's able to support his wife and
Wow,
kids.
isn't that wonderful?
He loves dealing with the people.
What neighborhood is he in, or does he move about?
He's in the hub of
Okay.
152nd and 3rd Avenue, I
Of
think it
course,
is.
and it's a very busy place down there. They get about 200,000 people who travel through there, so I could see how maybe he could do well.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the corner that he's on is famous for their kebabs. They've been vending there for a very, very long time. And every time I'm there, people are there and there's a line. And he was in the food industry for about 15 years and decided that he wanted to own his own business. So that's a good thing for people for mobile food vending, right? Is they get to be entrepreneurs themselves.
But before we run out of time, if somebody is watching us and they say, either I have a food cart and I would like to do better, what do you have advice? Do you have a thought, especially somebody who's familiar with this? Be patient with our city bureaucrats. Would that be the advice?
Well, yeah, right, because it is a bureaucratic system, so you do have to go through those channels. But in my experience of speaking with other restaurant owners and how they're, fighting everything, right? Inflation, COVID, they're upping their social media game, and apparently, social media is a great way to create traffic. So,
Ah,
if
and
anybody
and
wants
that makes total sense because
Mhm.
traditional media is not going to work for you
Right.
generally, and you can create a buzz, especially if you've got something really good and interesting to sell. Well, listen, Elba Rodriguez from I say the Bronx Times. I know that you've got a podcast. Where's your podcast?
Oh, well, I'm working on a podcast,
Working on a podcast,
Meet in Three for Heritage Radio Network,
right?
and also I'm working on Cooking in Mexican from A to Z with the same company.
We are thrilled to have you on the Bronx Buzz. We are really looking forward to you doing more and more. And the idea of a Bronxite undertaking something that's needed is music to our ears. Thank you so much. E.T. Rodriguez, you'll read her now in the Bronx Times and you'll see her elsewhere. And she's going to continue to tell us where we ought to get good food.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break and we're going to approach food from another perspective, and that is with our longtime friend Steve Ritz, who is the Green Bronx Machine. We'll do that right after this.